Hey everyone. So I finally got around to getting my arms around Jamovi in a way that I think would be very simple for everybody. I was considering posting the YouTube videos that I showed you, but I figured that might be a lot of um, a lot of video watching. It might have been a bit um, unnecessarily complicated, and I thought that taking the time to actually synthesize all of that information into one relevant video. I think that was the better choice, and so that's what I've done. So, how is this more relevant? Well, it pertains to the homework and to the activity that we did. So, it's not going to be anything with data from a different scenario at all. As you can see on the left side of the screen, here is the data that we have. And on the right side of the screen, you see my Jamovi window. So I have these two windows open simultaneously. And here's where I'm able to simply click and drag or copy and paste information from the Google spreadsheet into the Jamovi um, window. So let me start by naming the variables. And to do that, of course, we can just simply double click in the header. So I'm going to do that for header A, and I'm going to rename that one ID. And of course, in the description, I can just simply write participants ID. Okay. Now I'm going to choose the ID measure type, and that would be all for that one. I will simply click this arrow that takes me to the next variable. And what I will do there is insert a second variable relating to the ID. And this one would be what I call a group variable. So I'm just going to write group at the top. So that is the group variable. And what this will do, it will help us perform the independence t-sample test. The independent samples t-test. You will see what I mean when we get to that one. So the group would be either odd or even numbered participants. All right, now that would be a nominal measure type because it's either an odd or an even numbered participant. And since that is nominal, we leave it in the nominal measure type. We can use the text and we will add what are called levels. And the levels would be where we put either their odd or their even. So there are two levels to this nominal measure type. Click the +9, and the first one would be ODD odd, and the next would be EVEN even. So we now have two levels for this nominal variable called group. We have people in the odd group or people in the even group. You will see when we do the independent samples t-test where we must have a grouping variable, and there can only be two levels to this grouping variable. All right, so we can't use the ID in the independent samples test. We have to use a grouping variable, and that grouping variable allows us to categorize all of those IDs into either odd or even groups. All right, now the C variable, well, we're going to just put the slices in that one, and that's because this is what we will need for both one sample and independent samples t-test. If we're going to use the same data more than once, for different t-tests, we don't need to copy it twice or to make two different Jamovi files. We can use the same Jamovi data input to work these two different t-tests. I'm not going to copy them across just yet. Let me first name the variable. The variable's name is slices, and my description for that would be the monthly number of slices eaten. All right. Of course, that will be a continuous variable, and it will be in integer form because those are number of slices, and clearly it must be numbers. That of course won't have any levels, so we're going to leave that as it is. You may ask, well, why am I even moving across to create another set of variables? And notice what happened there. I just clicked in that empty cell off to the right where there was no heading, and up comes this display where it's asking me essentially what would I like to do. Would I like to create a new variable, a new computed variable, a new transformed variable? We just simply want another new data variable. And here is where I'm going to create two more variables. And those will be for my paired samples t-test. The first one I can simply call trial 1. And trial 1 would be, or maybe let me just name it the way I have it in the data. So maybe I just call that first difference. First difference. That would be the first set of differences that we had in the paired samples t-test. This is when you guys guessed the number that I wrote, and we found the differences between your guesses and my number. So we're going to have here the first set of differences. All right, and of course that would be continuous integer, and I can simply do right there a new data variable, and we have second diff, which would be the second set of differences. So now I'm able to actually copy all of the data that I need from the spreadsheet, right? I have my ID column with my IDs, so I'm going to now go to the spreadsheet, copy all of the IDs up to number 21. Clearly that's how many students were in the class yesterday. I'm going to go right there. That's in the first cell of the Jamovi data. And right under that ID header, I click in cell 1, and I'm going to now paste. I'm using Control V of my computer's keyboard. If you have a Mac, I think you use Command V to paste. Okay, so clearly I did that incorrectly. I should not have pasted the slices in ID. I need to paste the ID in ID. So I'm going to go back, copy the ID column, Command C or Control C if you have Windows, and go back to that same first cell, and there we go. I corrected that ID column. All right, the next I'm going to identify whether they're odd or even. So since of course 1 is odd, I'll type odd. 2 is even, type even. And we can continue this just to make it go more quickly. I'll just copy those two that I just created, and I'm just going to paste them. I don't know if it's allowing me to paste multiple. Let's see. Oh, yes, it does. So I was able to just copy the first two, and then drag all the way down, which would have been blank, of course. And I just pasted, and it pasted the remaining set. The last one needs to be filled in. Of course, 21 is odd, so I just do that. And there we go. We have the grouping variable column complete. Okay. Now, for the number of slices eaten per month, here's where I go to the green column on the spreadsheet. And I'm going to copy all of those up to the 21st. And once I copy, I come across to the Jamovi file and click in that first cell at the top of slices, and I paste. And all of my data from my slices per month in the green column from the spreadsheet are now transferred to the slices column in my Jamovi. Okay. Next, we're going to do the paired samples transfer. So I'm going to highlight the first difference column. Again, go up to the 21st row or the 21st entry, which is the 9 right here. Copy, go to the top on Jamovi, first cell at the top of that first difference, and paste. Everything is transferred. And I do the same for the second difference, starting with the second yellow column. Copy and come across to Jamovi, first cell at the top on the second difference, and paste. And there we go. We have all that we need. We have all that we need for the data transfer from the spreadsheet to Jamovi. And now here is where we start the t-tests. I click on t-tests. I'm already on analysis, so that's good. Click on t-tests. And the first test that I'd like to run is the one sample t-test. I click on that. See, our table over there is ready to go. I think now that as I'm finished with the spreadsheet, maybe I can move this out of there. And what I'll do instead, I'll bring the other sheet of relevance to our study here, which is the submission sheet. This submission sheet is what you will be using to submit your answers on Blackboard. Okay. That's the wrong one. Sorry, that's not it. So that is an old Jamovi. All right, here's the one that we're using. Good. So here is the one sample t-test. All right, and I'm just going to minimize this so all of this can fit on that page so you can see it. All right. Okay, so here are slices. Slices, that's the variable we're going to use in our one sample t-test, because remember, in our one sample t-test, the question was, does the average BC college student eat the same amount of pizza as the average American college student? And we saw where the national or American average was 78. So since we are going to simply compare our sample mean, which we would have gotten from the slices eaten, we brought slices as the dependent variable. Notice there isn't any other transfer that's necessary here. Yes, you're seeing other variables, but you do not need any of these to do the one sample t-test, only the slices variable. Now, we must remember to change the test value for our hypothesis, because our hypothesis is saying, hey, the null hypothesis means there is no statistical difference, no statistically significant difference between how many slices a BC college student eats from how many slices the average American college student eats. So if we're saying that both types of student eat the same amount, then we're saying that the null hypothesis would say, yeah, 78 would be the number of slices the BC college student eats, just like the average American student. All right. So that test value of 78, that national average, is what goes in the hypothesis box for our one sample t-test. You remember that from our work yesterday. And so now you see right there on the right side, the one sample t-test results are in. You saw where the statistic is significant. How do we know it's significant? Well, if we got a decimal that is lower than 0.05 for p-value, then anything lower than 0.05 would reveal significance, would mean significance. All right, and that would mean we have to adopt or accept the alternative hypothesis. In other words, we would say we reject the null hypothesis. That's another way of saying accept the alternative hypothesis. We reject the null hypothesis. And that's because the number of slices eaten by the average BC college student is significantly different from the number of slices eaten by the average American college student. So in the case of number one, you see which hypothesis we will be applying to the results. Okay, so which one of these hypotheses applies to the results? You can tell which one from that. Here you have the test statistic, so you can fill in that information. You have the p-value. What this is saying here, it's the actual p-value is not stated because it is so small. They have simply just put less than 0.001. So if you were to write this in the part that asks for the p-value, that would be accepted, less than 0.001. And that would be it for the one sample t-test. You can fill these answers here based on what we just discussed from this printout in the results area. Now, let's do the independent samples test. So we go to t-tests, independent samples, click on that one, and here we go. We have dependent variables and a grouping variable. Since we are only going to be looking at the slices eaten, that would be our only dependent variable. And of course, as I was explaining earlier, there is a grouping variable in the independent samples t-test. And this is where our nominal group variable goes into that spot. So I'm just clicking it and drag it across. All right. So we now have all that we need to conduct the independent samples t-test. And sure enough, right on the right side here, we see the results of our independent samples t-test. You have the test statistic. This DF, of course, is degrees of freedom. I'm not asking you to report that, although these are things you should know. And here is the p-value. So is this p-value illustrating some measure of significance? Is this result significant or not? I will leave that for you to determine. Again, I just mentioned what the threshold would be in terms of determining significance or not. So you might want to review the video a bit. You might want to rewind and listen to that decimalized value that I gave you and the conditions which determine significance or non-significance. Last but not least, here is the paired samples t-test. Click on that one. And since the paired variables must be dependent variables, we will do the first difference compared with the second difference. Now, this second difference should be dependent. So what I'm going to have to do here is go back to my data, and I'm going to just change this. So I'm going to double click on second difference and change that to continuous. Make sure it's continuous. Good. And now I can go back to analysis, t-tests, paired samples, and now I can make sure that both first difference and the second difference are dependent variables, because that's how we will conduct our paired samples t-test. We're comparing the first set of differences with the second set of differences. And what results do we have here? Well, I can just move this across a bit, or maybe I should not. But let me just scroll up a little bit here. Here is where you would have filled in the answers for the independent samples t-test. Now for the paired samples t-test, I want you to do a little bit more work. So I have not written what the null hypothesis is. I want you to take a good crack at this and come up with a way that you would write the first the null hypothesis here. This is not written properly. This should be mean 1 is equal to mean 2. And this would be mean 1 is not equal to mean 2. So it's pretty much like what I had here. I can just copy these. So these are obviously here, so maybe you can get a sense of what would go here. But of course you have to use the appropriate wording so that it matches the question. Alright, so our null hypothesis here is saying the mean of the first set is equal to the mean of the second set, and the alternative saying the mean of the first set is not equal to the mean of the second set. But of course, in the context of this question, the whole idea of our second guess is better than our first guesses. And I should say here, our second guess is different than our first guesses. The null hypothesis is saying, yes, they are. The alternative hypothesis is saying, no, they're not. So you will write the appropriate wording, just as I had words after here. See how I had this? The mean, so, right down there. And I have this one. So I had this set of words after null hypothesis, and I had this set of words after alternative hypothesis. But you notice that this is in reference to the pizza slices eaten question in independent samples t-test. This question down here is not about pizza slices. So you can't just simply copy and paste what we have up there and put it down here. You have to reword your null hypothesis and your alternative hypothesis to match the context of this question. So I will see what you guys deliver in your submissions. And then from there, of course, you fill in the information from the paired samples t-test, what your t-test statistic is, what your p-value is, and is the outcome statistically significant, whether it's yes or no. And based on that answer, you would let me know which hypothesis you choose, whether it's the null hypothesis, In that case, you'd say we accept the null hypothesis. If it's the other, you would say we reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so this video is just about 25 minutes. I think I've said enough and given you enough information. Get in your groups, work these out together. I would like each of you to at least try working them on your own on Jamovi, and then get together with your groups, try to fill this questionnaire out, and each group submit one of these completed to me via the link that will be in the week 3 folder. All right. Thank you so much. And it's due on Saturday by 11:59. So you have the rest of the week to hand this in. I think that's more than fair given the delays that were on my end. And I will see you on Monday, God's willing. Take care. Bye bye.